The ceiling has architects. You did everything right. You got the degree, you got the job, you showed up early, stayed late, said the right things to the right people in the right rooms, and somehow, you're still watching someone else make decisions. Still waiting to be trusted with the work you've already proven you can do. Still being told, not yet. Still being told, soon. Still being told, just be patient. This episode is about why that keeps happening. And I want to be very clear about something before we get into it. It is not about you. Welcome to Notes on Power. I'm your host, Tepoti Matsimani. This show exists because power is real. It is unevenly distributed, and most of the conversations we have about success, work, and leadership carefully avoid naming that. We don't do that here. Today, we are going inside corporate institutions, not to give you career advice, not to tell you how to network better or dress for the job you want. We're here to name what is actually happening in these spaces, structurally, deliberately, and at a cost to a very specific group of people, young professionals, people who are qualified, capable, and consistently logged out. Here is the argument I'm making today. Power in corporate Africa is not vacant. It is not sitting there waiting to be earned by whoever works hard enough. It is concentrated, it is inherited, and is actively protected. The ceiling above you has architects. Let's talk about who they are. Seniority culture is not inefficiency, it's architecture. Let's start with something most people in corporate spaces have felt but rarely say out loud. In most African corporate environments, authority follows tenure, not performance, not results, not demonstrated capability, but time served. The longer you've been here, the more you're trusted with, the more decisions you get to make, the more your opinion carries weight in a room. Now, when young professionals push back on this, the response is usually some version of, "That's just how it works. Be patient. Learn the culture. Your time will come." But I want to slow down on that and ask a different question. Who does this system really work for? Because here's what I've observed. Seniority culture does not exist because organizations haven't figured out a better way. It exists because it is extraordinarily convenient for the people already inside it. It guarantees that decision-making authority stays with a specific generation indefinitely, regardless of whether that generation is producing the best outcomes for the organization. It is not inefficiency, it is architecture. And the practical effect is this. Young professionals can be brilliant, credentialed, and consistently delivering, and still have no meaningful access to power. Because power in these institutions is not tied to what you produce. It is tied to how long you've been in a building. I want you to think about your own organization right now. When last someone under 35 get a real seat at the table? Not a title, not a seat on a committee that advises people who make decisions. A seat where decisions actually get made, where strategy gets set, where money moves. Take your time with that question. Because if the answer is not recently or never, that is not an accident. That is a system functioning exactly as it was designed. When power and time served are the same thing, patience becomes a political act, and waiting becomes the price of admission to rooms you already deserve to be in. Mentorship is gatekeeping in a blazer. If you're a young professional, you have been given this advice. I guarantee it. Find a mentor, build relationships with people ahead of you, learn from those who've already walked the path. And look, I'm not going to tell you that's entirely wrong. Access matters. Relationships matter. Having someone who can open a door for you or warn you about the wall you're about to walk into, that matters. I want to make a distinction that almost nobody makes explicitly, and I think it's one of the most important ones in this conversation. There is a difference between mentorship and sponsorship. Mentorship is someone teaching you how to navigate the system, giving you advice, sharing their experience, helping you understand the unwritten rules. Sponsorship, on the other hand, is someone with actual power putting their name behind yours, advocating for you in rooms you are not in, saying, this person is ready, I'm vouching for them, give them the opportunity. Those are not the same thing. And the people handing out mentorships know that. What young professionals in African corporate spaces largely have access to is mentorship. Informal, relationship-based, available mostly to people who already resemble leadership in some way, who went to the right schools, who move in the right circles, who make the right people comfortable. Sponsorship, the thing that actually moves careers, that actually transfers power, is rare, and it is rarely offered across generational lines, demographic lines, or any line that makes the sponsor uncomfortable. So what happens? Young professionals work hard at the relationship. They absorb the advice, they follow the guidance, and they wait for the door to open. And the door still doesn't open. Why is that? Because mentorship was never the key to begin with. The advice was real, the relationship was real, but the thing that was actually needed, someone with power choosing to share it, that was never on the table. Young professionals are handed mentorship and told it's opportunity. It is not the same thing. And the gap between those two words is where a lot of careers quietly stall. So now, let's talk about readiness and how it is not a standard, how it was made a judgment call. There is a phrase that will follow young professionals throughout their entire corporate lives, if they let it. You are not quite ready yet. More experience, more exposure, a bit more time, come back in a year. We want to see more of X, we need you to develop Y. And the thing about this feedback is that it always sounds reasonable. It always sounds like it's coming from a place of genuine investment in your development. Like the person saying it actually wants you to succeed and is simply being honest with you about where you are. But I want to ask the question that rarely gets asked in these conversations. Who decides when someone is ready? And do they have a conflict of interest in that decision? Because here's the thing about readiness in corporate environments. It is not a standard. There is no rubric, there is no objective threshold that once crossed triggers advancement. Readiness is a judgment call. It is subjective and it is made by people who currently hold power that advancement would require them to share. That is a conflict of interest, a direct one for that matter, and we almost never name it. The criteria shifts, the goalpost moves. The feedback is vague enough that it can never be fully satisfied. And every time you come close, there is a new thing to develop, a new area to strengthen, a new reason why not yet. If the standard for readiness was objective, it would be written down. It would be applied consistently. It would look the same for everyone going for the same role. But it doesn't because it was never meant to. Now, I want to be careful here. I'm not saying every manager who has ever told a young person they are not ready is lying or acting in bad faith. Some of them believe what they are saying. Some of that feedback is real. But the system within which that feedback operates is one where subjectivity conveniently, consistently serves the people already inside it. And that is not a coincidence. Because when you cannot falsify the criteria, When you cannot know in advance what ready looks like, when the finish line keeps moving, you are not in a development process. You are in a holding pattern, and someone built that pattern deliberately. So what have we done? We have medicalized the structural problem. This is the part of the conversation I think matters most. So stay with me. When young professionals don't advance in corporate spaces, when they stall, when they plateau, when they eventually leave, there is a story that gets told about why. And that story is almost always personal. Wrong attitude, too impatient, doesn't understand the culture, needs to develop executive presence, lacks strategic thinking, not quite the right fit. The story is always about the individual. Their gaps, their failures, their areas for development. And here's what almost never gets said in that same conversation. The board hasn't rotated in 11 years. The hiring pipeline pulls from the same 4 universities it has always pulled from. The leadership team plays golf together on weekends and has done so for a decade. Every senior appointment in the last 3 years has been an internal referral. The criteria for promotion is unwritten and held informally by 3 people who all came up together. That is the structural story, and it almost never gets told out loud. Instead, we have taken a collective problem and handed people individual treatment. The diagnosis is always personal. The disease is always systemic. And the cost of this is enormous because young professionals internalize this. They take the feedback and they believe it. They work harder at self-improvement. They go to more workshops. They read books. They develop executive presence. They become more strategic. And the structure, unchanged, unchallenged, produces the same outcome. Because the structure was never the thing being worked on. I want to leave you with a question before we close. When you receive feedback that your career is stalled because of something about you, who benefits from you believing that? Who benefits from you directing your energy inward rather than outward? Who benefits from you auditing yourself rather than auditing the system? The question is not always, what do I need to do differently? Sometimes the question is, who needs me to keep asking that question instead of the right one? So, where does that leave us? I'm not going to give you a 5-step plan. That's not what this show is for. But I do want to give you something useful to walk away with. The first move, always, is naming the structure. You cannot challenge what you haven't named. You cannot push back against the force you've been trained to experience as your own personal failure. So name it. Seniority culture that protects existing power. Mentorship that substitutes for sponsorship. Readiness criteria that shifts every time you get close. Individual diagnosis for structural diseases. Name it. Not so you become cynical, not so you stop working, but so you stop misdirecting your energy. For those of you who are inside these institutions and have access to power, the question is not whether advantages were handed to you. Most of us didn't design the system we entered. The question is what you are doing with the access that other people don't have. Are you mentoring or are you sponsoring? Are you advising or are you advocating? There is a difference. And you know which one costs more. And for everyone, I want to end with this. The ceiling above you is real. The frustration you feel when you keep hitting it is valid. The exhaustion of performing readiness for people who keep moving the line, that is real. And it makes sense. It isn't a weakness. But that ceiling has architects. It was designed, it was built, it was maintained, which means it can be named, challenged, and with enough people asking the right questions, dismantled. That's what Notes on Power is about. Not inspiration, not motivation. Power. Who has it, how it moves, and what it costs the people it's kept from. I'm Tepo T. Thanks for listening, and this was Notes on Power.